On today's show, Team USA falls to Germany in the FIBA World Cup. Should this be considered a disappointment? Then we power rank the Atlantic Division. Will the 76ers trade James Harden? What do we think of the Celtics offseason? Will the Nets or the Knicks make the playoffs? And what's next for the Raptors? All of that and more on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On NBA. I'm Wes Goldberg, here as always with Adam Mares. However you might be tuning in, YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets. Guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. We're going to be continuing our power ranking series as we go through every division. We're going to predict where each team will finish in the regular season, then get to some fun categories like best offseason edition and most likely to blow it up. But before we get to any of that, Team USA this morning lost to Germany in the semifinals, ending the United States' chance to win the World Cup. They'll play Canada for third place over the weekend. But if you ain't first, you're last, Adam. Is this a disappointment for Team USA?
Of course. Team USA had the most NBA players. They had a good enough squad. They were favored coming in. I mean, first of all, I will say this. It is a disappointment because Team USA is a team that it is gold or bust. Everything else is coming up short. But at the same time, I'm the international basketball guy. I love international basketball. I think it gets disrespected by American fans and American basketball audiences. So yes, it's a disappointment because they're good enough where the goal is championship or bust, but it's not necessarily a surprise. There were good teams out there, in particular teams that had the size to punish Team USA, and that's exactly what Germany did.
Every team that the Team USA had the most problems against were the teams with the biggest size, right? They had Jaren Jackson Jr. starting at center, which not a great World Cup for him. His stock is down as much as Anthony Edwards' stock has gone up, right?
Although, I don't know. We'll talk about Anthony in a second. Let's talk about Ant in a minute. But
yeah,
on Jaren Jackson.
So every team that they faced with size was the teams that gave them problems. And, they managed to figure out a way to figure it out at the end. But Germany was just too good. Daniel Tice was awesome for them. They've got a bunch of guys on that roster that have been playing international ball for a very long time versus Team USA, which is always sort of like transfer portal-y kind of feel every single World Cup. It's like, I don't know, let's just throw these guys together and kind of see what happens and figure it out midstream. It's a disappointment. It could be both things, right? It could be a disappointment because there is so much NBA talent, while also like giving the head nod and all due respect to the international game, to teams like Germany and Serbia who are going to be playing in the final, and other teams that gave them problems. Like, you could be respectful of what the competition level is, but also be disappointed at the same time.
But here's the thing about it, Wes. The game of basketball has evolved a lot over the last 25 years. And a lot of that evolution has come from influence from the international game. The international game has different rules. The various leagues and cultures all impact how that game has evolved over the last handful of years. And I've always said, if you love the game of basketball, if it's all the different parts of basketball is what you like, then you're interested in what teams like Germany and Serbia and Spain and all of these great European powerhouses, what they've created. And so when you watch these games, to me, Team USA has always just kind of thrown together rosters of really talented players, and they've refined that process and tried to get guys in the system to create something of continuity. But the lack of complete continuity just makes them vulnerable. And that's what you saw in this tournament. German teams a lot of the guys have been playing together for a lot of years, had that chemistry, had that sense of pride and urgency, and they just played cohesive. I thought Team USA, throughout large parts of this game, the ball got stagnant. They didn't have the balance across their roster, especially with size and playmaking, so that they could play a full 40-minute game. So I just thought that, to me, this was a very interesting tournament, as it always is. The U.S. was bound to lose. Given the way that they approached the tournament, they were bound to lose one of these sooner or later. And like I said, it's not a surprise. These are good teams. And can we talk about Serbia for a second?
Yes.
So Serbia came into this unranked in the World Cup. The top 10 teams, according to FIBA, the top 10 teams ranked coming into this did not include Serbia. Germany was ranked 7th. Now, in a one and done tournament, this happens. We see it in March Madness all the time. Anybody can kind of get hot on any given day. But what I love about this, and full disclosure, I went to Serbia. I made the documentary on the history of Serbian basketball, which you could find 100 Invisible Threads. People don't realize that there are these countries out there, and Serbia is a nation of 7 million people, just 7 million people, that has a deep basketball history that actually goes back, West, 100 years. The game was introduced to Serbia in 1923, 100 years ago. This isn't a nation that just had one good guy, Nikola Jokic, the two-time MVP and now finals MVP. They're not a country that just produced this one-off. They're a country that has 100 years of basketball tradition and really 70 intense years of basketball tradition, and with an enormous amount of gold and silver medals under their belt, or I should say around their necks, from the last 40 years of their international competition. So it's one of those things where I think most people watching this will look at it and say, who are these people over here? Like, oh, U.S. lost. They lost to some nobody who's in. No, Serbia's been doing this for 50 years. Germany has one under their belt in 1994, a Eurobasket gold medal. They have a good team right now, but the international competition is just so much richer and deeper than people realize. And I hope that this is just another example in a long line of examples of, hey, this is an international game now.
It's all well said, and you could tell like Team USA's guys having a hard time, even just adjusting some of the rules. Like Jaren Jackson Jr. with like the goaltends constantly and the fouls and all. Like you could tell he was kind of having a hard time.
He struggles with the fouls in the NBA too, though.
Before we get to that's a huge thing with him. But like before we get to what this means for the Olympics in 2024, I feel a zag coming from you on Anthony Edwards, who is sort of. He's like the star of Team USA right now, right? He tried to take over today against Germany. 23 points on almost 60% shooting, 10 of 17 overall. He was sort of the guy for them, especially down the stretch. Had that big three that kind of kept them in it. Ultimately, obviously, Team USA didn't win, but I'm kind of with you on. I'm assuming the zag is coming. Is the zag coming?
Well, it's just that. He was in multiple games the cause and solution to Team USA's problems.
Yeah.
And tonight was maybe the funniest because I thought he was really bad. His shot selection, but also not even just shot selection, the rhythm of, I think it was hard to have a rhythm of the game when he was out there for large portions, especially in the second and third quarters. Now, in the fourth quarter, when Team USA was down 12 points, he brought them back in with spectacular playmaking and shot making. But it was one of those things where when you watch this tournament, you see how good he can be at his absolute best, just unstoppable in a zone, aggressive, confident, all those things. But then you also see how much more he has to learn about the game. Yep. And not every player learns that. A lot of players come in talented, and it's like, if they just unlock this, then the sky's the limit. And you watch this tournament and are reminded, oh yeah, he hasn't unlocked that yet. It just comes and goes with him.
It was like 20% too aggressive, right? It was 20% too me first, right? And if he needs to dial it back, and you could tell, I thought the most telling play of the entire tournament for Team USA was within the final minute. Anthony Edwards brings the ball up, shakes a couple of defenders, ends up kind of flowing into this pick and roll with Jaren Jackson Jr. on the left side, and Jaren Jackson Jr. kind of hesitates and doesn't really know where Ant is going to go. Anthony Edwards jumps up, and I think everybody just assumes he's going to shoot because that's what he's done the entire tournament. And then Ant tries to like pitch him the ball on like a pick and pop, but Jaren Jackson's rolling and it turns into a turnover and it's a wasted possession. That was after Austin Reeves like smartly drew that offensive foul to get the possession back. Like Team USA could have won the game on that possession. Yeah. And instead, there's just that. And look, Jaren Jackson and Anthony Edwards are not teammates. They've never played together that I know of, but still, like you could just look at Jaren Jackson and being like, oh, Anthony Edwards is obviously going to shoot this because that's what he's been doing the entire tournament, and was surprised when Ant passed him the ball, and that's why it ended up being a turnover. So
right.
I'm with you. He was a star, and he tried to take over, but there's still a lot there for him to learn.
Another guy, by the way, Tyrese Halliburton's defense in this game I thought was really bad. And, he's another guy that I don't want to say none of these guys have really been anointed, but they are guys that we're all excited for. They've got a lot of upside, and we're ready for them to sort of arrive. And again, this was one where Team USA really needed Halliburton to be able to get through some screens and contest some shots. And he came up, including on what was probably the most important basket. Team USA was down 12 in the fourth. They come all the way back to, I think they were down 2 points. Halliburton out on the right wing guarding, I can't even remember who it was. And he gets crossed up basically to where he falls down.
Yeah.
And and gets a shot right in his eye. I think it was a 3-pointer. I think they were actually only down 1 at that point, and that 3 pushed it to 4. So it stood out to me. Like, sometimes you need these pressure games. You need playoffs, or you need games on the stage where you're like, okay, how do these guys handle it? And I thought Tyrese Halliburton, I love him. He's one of my favorite young players in all of the NBA. But this was one where I was like, oh, yeah, he's got another level he has to get to defensively, because teams are going to be running him through screens in a playoff series.
Quickly, what can Team USA learn from this and apply to the Olympics next summer in Paris? I think one of the things in terms of roster construction is a big thing. Like, look, we don't know how many of these guys are going to be on the Olympic roster. I think Jaren Jackson Jr.'s status might be a little shaky. They might be looking for an upgrade at center, maybe somebody a little bit bigger there. But I also think just from a roster, they could probably use more size.
Yeah.
Since that was sort of their Achilles heel in this tournament. What do you think?
So Team USA, when they made their shift with the Redeem team, has kind of come up with this strategy of, what do we have? We have shooting, we're hyper athletic, and we have length on the perimeter. And so they've gone to that, which is sort of an NBA thing, right? Small ball, versatile, switch everything. But the international, there's competition. There's no defensive 3 seconds. There's the goaltending rule where you can knock it off the rim. Bigs are not as disadvantaged by the rule book, Wes. I've been harping on this for years. By the rule book, they're not as disadvantaged in international competition. And I think the strategy of being small and fast and long is actually still smart. But I do think you probably need a big body. And by the way, that just might happen to be, as rumors have it, the Cameroonian French national Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid might be the missing player Team USA needs. Forget the fact that the U.S. is like his 3rd country, not even his 1st or 2nd country. It doesn't matter. Need some size. Let's go out and get our guy to come in and save him.
I love the idea of Grant Hill and everybody just trying to recruit Joel Embiid to switch allegiances to countries.
It makes no sense. It's actually, so Serbia is very proud of the fact that they are one of 2 nations that never uses foreign-born players, Lithuania being the other. These are basketball-crazed international teams. And you see guys that get nationalized and will play for France or Spain or whatever. They're very proud that, no, we stick to our national citizens. That's all we get. And by the way, just to put a punctuation, I have two thoughts on this. One, I know a lot of American fans are going to say, yeah, but when we bring our best, we win. Does Serbia have Jokic? Does Serbia have Vasa Micic, the MVP of EuroLeague? No, they do not. Do they have Lucic, Marinkovic, Kalinic? They don't have these guys that usually make up their starting lineup. So they too are on their B team, yet no excuses. They made their way to the final. And then lastly, just as a little piece of history, because I love this stuff and I want to share it with our audience, the head coach of the Serbian national team is Svetislav Pesic. He was a legendary coach for Serbia who helped shepherd one of the best non-American teams in international competition history, the 1987 gold medal U19 team from Bormio, who was featured Vlade Divac, Dino Raja, Sasha Djordjevic, 3 guys that played in the NBA and really went on to form a great Yugoslav national team that won 3 straight gold medals from 89 to 92. He then went on to coach Germany, actually, of all places, in Dirk Nowitzki in Eurobasket in 93 and won a gold medal with them. So they have this features Svetislav Pesic, who's a Serbian national coaching Serbia, who once won the only gold medal in Germany's history for Germany, a gold medal that was so important that when the soccer team won the FIBA World Cup, the FIFA team celebrated by putting on shirts of Svetislav Pesic. So there's a nice little tie-in between Germany and Serbia and their shared history here with their coaches.
Mr. International Basketball himself, Adam Mares. That's why we love talking FIBA basketball with you on Fridays. That was all great. But moving on from the international game, back to stateside, NBA. Who's going to win the Atlantic Division? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, this deal's amazing. All customers who bet $5 will get $100 off of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Let me repeat that. All you have to do is bet $5. Take $5, bet it on FanDuel, and you're going to get $100 off of your NFL Sunday Ticket which is newly moved to YouTube and YouTube TV. It's your one-stop shop for the start of the NFL season. This is a no-brainer. You're saving $95 just by doing this. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you could bet on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Welcome back to Locked On NBA. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Moving on to our power rankings of the Atlantic Division. Last season, the Celtics finished with the best record, but lost to the Heat in the Eastern Conference Finals. Behind the Celtics in the standings were the Sixers, Knicks, Nets, who traded Kyrie and Kevin Durant midseason, and then the Raptors finishing at the end of this division. A fascinating division that could still change quite a bit between now and the start of the season. Maybe by the end of the season also, but let's start at the top. I've got the Boston Celtics winning this division again. Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Al Horford, the big trade for them, moving Marcus Smart in a 3-team deal, getting Kristaps Porzingis. He probably starts at power forward. They still got Robert Williams III. They still got Malcolm Brogdon. They still got Peyton Pritchard. They added O'Shea Brissett. What do you think about Boston and that Porzingis Marcus Smart trade?
I think it's a great trade for Boston. You know, Marcus Smart was the heart and soul, I think, of that team. So you always worry about what does this team look like. I think that the downside for them emotionally is a little bit deeper than it was. You start to worry about those things. I really do believe a team has a soul, and sometimes you mess with that. You get better on paper, you get better players, but you lose the soul. I think there's a chance that happens with this Boston team. But the on-paper impact, you now have 3 bigs, which, again, I just talked about how the NBA, I think teams are going a little too small, especially with Jokic now as the reigning finals MVP and the Nuggets as the reigning champ. You might need to have 3 bigs and a stretch big in particular. So I think he poses a really unique matchup for guys like Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, teams that they are thinking they're probably going to have to face en route to a championship. So I like the move. I think it gives them a very dynamic front court without clogging up or taking away from their spacing, which is what helped them thrive last year offensively.
I like the move as well. I like Porzingis a lot. I wrote a feature on him last year and got a chance to talk with him. And you know, I don't know that a lot of people were tuning into Wizards games. Mm-hmm. I thought it was maybe his most well-rounded season of his career. Maybe not numbers-wise, like popping off the page, but like he did with the Knicks. But I think he's a well-rounded player who fits exactly what they need and kind of provides some roster balance too. There was too many guards last year. You swap one for Porzingis. They wanted to move Brogdon, not Smart, but Brogdon failed the physical and all that stuff happened. So they ended up having to move Marcus Smart. In terms of the heart and soul part of it, I kind of think it's a little overstated. I understand the worry, but if the entire problem with the Celtics was that they were a little mentally soft, and that's kind of been the thing against them, then what do you need that heart and soul for? If Marcus Smart is in the heart and soul is soft, then get rid of your soft heart and soul and swap it out. And I think what I really like about this, even more from a roster construction standpoint, Adam, is it's going to put Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown in leadership positions where I think before they were able to take some of that leadership stuff and just kind of slide it over to the table to Marcus Smart. He was the guy that handled that stuff, but now he's gone, right? And Tatum and Brown, a little bit more mild-mannered, a little bit more polite than Marcus Smart. I think it's going to thrust them in a position to really take over that locker room. And I actually think a heart and soul change was needed for this group. And I think by moving Marcus Smart, you force yourself to be a little uncomfortable and try to grow from it. And I like that.
You're assuming, though, that they're up for that challenge. I kind of am assuming they're not. So I think you're right. They will be in that position, but I'm not counting on it. And then, look, you're making light of, hey, if they didn't get over the hump, they did make it to the conference finals. So it's not – my point is it could be worse. And this year, there's a chance that it is worse, you know, if the on-paper part doesn't make up for that heart and soul part. And by the way, Malcolm Brogdon, sort of the opposite of Marcus Smart, like a little bit of a guy that his teammates, not just in Boston, but around, have always sort of, you know, not totally vibed with.
I don't know that it's going to work, but I think it's something that they have to figure out. And if Jason Tatum is going to be that dude, he's got to do it. Like, sometimes you just got to be put in a leadership position. Even if you're not a quote unquote natural leader, you kind of just got to figure it out. And I think this forces him to have to try to at least figure it out. So I'm just really interested to see what happens there.
Let me just say real quick before these Boston fans all driving down the street are about to park the car and come after me. I think they're going to go to the finals. I think this is a really good team, and I think that the Porzingis move is really going to make them dynamic and interesting. And so I'm just giving the context, but I do think it'll work out.
I'm not ready to go there with Boston. They could park the car and come after me if they want. That's what we do, though. I host Locked On Heat. I'm used
culture, baby.
That's right. Come at me. All right. Let's move on to the Philadelphia 76ers. Can they win this division even without James Harden? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On NBA. Welcome back to Locked On NBA. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Jumping into the Atlantic Division power rankings. You and I both have the Celtics finishing first in this division. I've got Philadelphia next, despite all the drama. I'm not. They were 54-28 last year. Joel Embiid won league MVP. The big thing with them is James Harden. He does not seem very happy with Daryl Morey. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that. And we don't know what's going to happen. We got that ESPN report from Ron Shelburne earlier this week. He's calling her a liar and say he's going to do his own reporting, which I'm not even sure what that means. Is that like doing your own research?
It is.
I have no idea. So who knows what's going to happen with Harden? And who knows, like, who was even going to trade for him? I don't know what the team is. So, like, that's, to me, the big thing hanging over the Sixers. Regardless, though, Adam, I find it hard to believe that we're going to see James Harden dribble a basketball while in a Philadelphia 76ers uniform again, based on everything that's going on. What do you think?
I mean, we just 2 years ago had Ben Simmons show up to camp and with his cell phone in his pocket and kind of moping around. I mean, we might get a similar thing here with James Harden. But, yeah, look, I don't know what to make of the 76ers. Let's put the Harden part in a box because that's been talked through all summer. Let's put that to the side here. This is a team that gets a new coach in Nick Nurse, who is, I would say, the opposite of Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers, incredible
in almost every way. Yes.
In every way, like great at connecting and motivating his players and understanding his team and this or that, but maybe not the best tactician. Well, now you get Nick Nurse, a guy who's a great tactician, but maybe not the best at connecting with players. So you get a real polar opposite. But I am curious to see if they devise a offense and defensive strategy that just takes advantage of the margins. And, we're watching this team going, how do they keep winning? And then you've got players like Tyrese Maxey, who are going to get a huge opportunity. Nick Nurse went on the pod with the Barstool pod with Patrick Beverley the other day and mentioned that he wants to play Paul Reed he wants to go big ball. He wants to play Paul Reed alongside Joel Embiid, which I think is very interesting. 76ers fans have been wanting to see that for years and years. So I think that there is a chance that this is a team that sort of finds a good vibe for the first time in the last 4 years, where it's like, hey, this is new and fresh. So I'm not totally doom and gloom on Philadelphia, even though I do think that they are talk about razor thin margins like we did for Boston. Yep. I mean, the vibe in Philly is on a knife's edge for sure.
It is so precarious what's happening with the 76ers right now. And if you're Joel Embiid and you're looking around, you're like, why can't it just be normal here for a second? You compare it, what he's got going on with his biggest rival, arguably is Nikola Jokic, right? With Denver Nuggets. And it's like, all right, we've got Michael Malone, we've got Jamal Murray, we've got some players that make sense around you, and we're just going to let you guys grow and figure it out, right? And there was that report in Denver. It's like, hey, we could have traded Jamal Murray for a star to be named later, mystery star player, and we didn't do it. Right. Because they like the continuity. And Joel Embiid's like, I have no idea what continuity means. He has no experience in continuity. And so I think it's fair to wonder what happens with Joel Embiid. To take James Harden out of the box for a second, I would just look, I'm not a general manager, but I would just trade him, man. I would, if you've already decided and signaled to the rest of the league that he's not a max value player anymore because you didn't give it to him, right? And that's sort of the genesis of this entire argument between him and Daryl Morey in the first place. Then you can't really also turn around and expect to try to get a star value in a trade for him, right? It doesn't really make sense. So just trade him for some shooting or something. And I think if whatever you do to fill out the rest of the roster, I think Tyrese Maxey's really good. Joel Embiid's obviously really good. I think this team could be deep. There's other moves that you could be made here. This team could be good enough to make the conference finals with Joel Embiid, with Tyrese Maxey, with what else they got going on, with some tactician stuff from Nick Nurse, and without James Harden. And I don't think they really need a major upgrade if they do trade James Harden. I think they're that good, and I think the East is kind of wide open. So
I agree that the East is wide open. I still think they need to get some. I don't think this is a very complete roster. I think it's interesting again, but One, you say just trade James Harden as if there's a bunch of people out there that would even trade him
Fair.
50 cents on the dollar. And I honestly wonder how many teams are like, we're not good enough with him. And if we're not good enough, is this a long-term play? No. What are we doing? I just wonder how many teams really think they're a James Harden away and they're willing to give up half their roster to get him. I just don't think there's a lot of market for that.
If I'm Philadelphia, I'm calling Chicago and I'm like, do you want to just give us DeMar DeRozan? We'll take a shot
Okay.
maker.
Right.
We'll take a shot maker. You know, it's just like, we'll just take that for a year and see what happens. But whatever. All right. So we've both got Boston and Philadelphia coming up. I've got the New York Knicks. I've got them finishing third. And I really wanted to put Brooklyn here because I think I like more of Brooklyn's players, but I just think that there's more holes on their roster. I thought the Knicks did well to just kind of keep their guys, add Dante DiVincenzo. They've got Jalen Brunson, Quentin Grimes, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson, and Isaiah Hartenstein as sort of their two-headed monster at center. Obviously, Tom Thibodeau as head coach. They didn't really lose anybody other than Derrick Rose, who wasn't playing for them anyway. I could see Brooklyn finishing third, but I kind of just played it safe, and I had the Knicks finishing third, but maybe only by a couple of wins here.
I think you're right. I don't even know if it's just by a couple of wins. I think that I like Brooklyn a lot, but I think they're probably comfortably here. I am curious if there is a regression on this team. They were a little bit of a darling team last year. Exciting. The Jalen Brunson thing was exciting. By the way, Jalen Brunson, we talk about biggest losers of the FIBA World Cup. I think he's not at the top of that list, but he's on the list somewhere. But yeah, I don't know. I like this roster. And the guy that I've always said I liked on this one, I always have the weird guys that I like. I like Isaiah Hartenstein.
Same.
And I even like Mitchell Robinson. So I like both of their centers there. It's a good roster. It's just not one that I think is going to take a step up. They might not take a step down, but not a step up.
We saw this the first year when Tibbs in New York. They make that playoffs, and then they regress that second year. But you look at their stats from last year, like they didn't have any sort of those regression red flags where like opponents shot really poorly from three-point range, so you expect like a regression. They didn't really get any benefits like that were super major one way or the other that way. And I just think like, okay, everybody in the rotation can defend to a certain degree. Everybody in the rotation can score a little bit in one way or the other. To me, the big thing is, could Julius Randle be awesome the way that he was awesome in the regular season again? Like, that to me is the big thing. But they could also make a trade. Like, they could always flip Julius Randle. Evan Fournier is still there. Isaiah Hartenstein is a good player coming off the bench, making $9 million. That's a big chunky salary that they might be able to sort of repurpose. So I think they're a team that could also make a trade if things go, south a little bit early. I've got Brooklyn finishing behind the Knicks, going through their depth chart. Spencer Dinwiddie, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Nick Claxton. Coming off the bench, they've got Dennis Smith Jr., who they added. They've got Lonnie Walker, who they added. Cam Thomas is still there. They've got Royce O'Neal, who's still there. And then, of course, the big one is Ben Simmons and what's his role going to be for this team. I kind of have a penciled in as their backup five. I suppose he could even start at point guard if they want to kind of move on from the Spencer Dinwiddie experience. Like, there's so many outcomes for Ben Simmons, who is shockingly posting workout videos all summer.
Of course, baby. Let's go.
It's Ben Simmons' workout season, baby, with a Z.
It looks great. He's in the best shape of his life.
The one thing, I mean, we don't even have to have the Ben Simmons conversation because who knows?
Why not?
Do you think he's ready to contribute? What do you think?
I mean, maybe we'll get to this in most interesting, but I mean, that's an interesting question. He's a talented player. He's not, something happened to him mentally and emotionally over the last 2 seasons that obviously completely broke him. So is he still broken? Has this time off helped him? He was, even when he was not taking shots, was an impact player. He was one of the better defenders in all of the NBA, probably a top 5 defensive player in all of the NBA. And then offensively, he was great in transition. You could spread things out if you were able to, which, by the way, this Brooklyn team is able to spread you out. They have shooters all over the place. So to me, I look at it and I go, I don't know if I'm rooting for it or not. I can't say I'm rooting for it, but I think it's significantly more interesting of a question than what most people would say. Because I think they've just written him off, but he's talented.
Super talented. I look at what that starting lineup is too. They obviously only played a handful of minutes together after that deadline, after they traded Kyrie and Kevin Durant. But in 328 minutes, that team had a net rating of plus 3.1. Their offensive rating was a 111.3. This is Dinwiddie, Bridges, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, and Nick Claxton. That starting lineup had an offensive rating that basically would have ranked 26 in the NBA. Not great. But their defensive rating, 108.2, would have ranked first by far. That would have been the best defense in the league. And that kind of makes sense to me. I do question where the scoring is going to come from, and that's why I had them finishing behind the Knicks. And when you think about Ben Simmons, it's like, okay, well, they're already kind of elite defensively without Ben Simmons. I don't know that you're counting on Ben Simmons to answer your offensive problems. So I think he could still be good. I think he can sort of just double down on what it is that they're good at. But I don't know that he solves like the other needs, but that's not necessarily his job either. So we'll see what happens with them. They need something. They need some sort of offensive spark. We'll see if Mikal Bridges can kind of be that guy, I suppose, is the bet there. Let's go to Toronto. They finished last year at 41-41. That's where I have them finishing this year.
Okay.
They add Dennis Schroeder, German All-Star in the World Cup. They draft Grady Dick. They added Jalen McDaniels, and then the big thing, they move on from Nick Nurse. They move on from Fred VanVleet also, and then they hire Darko Rajakovic to take over as head coach there. How does Rajakovic change things from Nick Nurse, do you think?
I mean, we don't know. With a new coach, you never really know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
By the way, another Serbian coach. So again, this 100-year tradition of Serbian basketball, just pointing it out. It's all over somehow it's like everywhere, but nobody knows it and nobody sees it. But a Serbian coach. So who knows? I mean, we don't know what kind of coach is he. Players coach? Is he offensive coach? We're going to learn a lot about him.
He's been on a couple of different in different organizations on different staffs, right? He came over to the NBA with Sam Presti in Oklahoma City, like in like 2008 or 2009 or something like that. And then kind of took over their G League program for a while, and he was really good at player development. That's kind of how he made his bones in the NBA. He ends up on Monty Williams' staffs in Phoenix during the Chris Paul years there, and was a big part of formulating their pick and roll game, which you don't really associate with like international basketball. You think more like freedom of ball movement, body movement.
You? I mean, you might think that way. I don't think this way at all. There's a great tradition of European pick and roll players.
Absolutely. And he kind of applied that and helped Monty Williams and Chris Paul sort of generate that pick and roll offense that was so intricate and so effective, and obviously got them to the NBA Finals against Milwaukee in 2021. So he was a big part of that. And then he was on the Grizzlies staff, which we know what they did. It was a lot of that kind of high pick and roll with John Morant and stuff like that. But you look at Toronto's roster, they don't have a guy. Like, I know they added Dennis Schroeder. He can run pick and roll for you too, but he's not Chris Paul and he's not John Morant, It'd be interesting. Like, do you use Scotty Barnes at point guard? Like, Barnes has no offensive shot game to like, everybody's going to go under on those pick and rolls. So I think he's got his work cut out for him, but he's proven to be super smart and super creative with this stuff. So, like, you and I are saying the same thing. I think people, again, associate international basketball with like not the pick and roll thing, but he's willing to do the traditional pick and roll thing. He's willing to go big. He's gone big in the past. He's willing to go small. I think he's just willing to do whatever it takes to win games. My question is less him, and it's more about like the roster construction in general, because it kind of still looks like the roster that Nick Nurse had and couldn't figure out, right? Just, swap Fred VanVleet for Dennis Schroeder.
But the difference is, I feel Toronto now, they probably should have been this way last year, but I feel now that they are just a straight rebuilding team who hasn't quite made the final all-in push, to get to become that. But you look at it, they still have really young players that you like. You have Boucher, you have Scotty Barnes. And when you talk about player development, Scotty Barnes is a guy to me that I love his skill set. I love his talent. I love his mold, but he needs a lot of development. And we saw that last year where there was maybe a lack of development. We didn't see it. So to me, I look at this and I go, this is a team. They bring in a coach that probably has a long runway. They're probably starting to think long, and they just have some pieces. I think they have better trade assets than they do players at the moment, because Odi Anunoby's a very good player and a great trade asset, but he's not really, doesn't make sense on this team. I even like a guy like Gary Trent Jr. I don't know how much he's a part of their long-term plans.
But they have an extension, and he's on an expiring contract at like 18 mil or something.
Well, there you go. So they've got some guy. I mean, Siakam, obviously. They've got some guys, if they wanted to pivot and go another direction, they can probably really get a war chest of young prospects and draft picks and this or that. And I kind of suspect it happens. But I'm intrigued to see player development. I'm intrigued to see Scotty Barnes, Grady Dick, some of these younger guys under a rookie head coach. That'll be interesting to follow.
Let's close it out with our categories. Best addition in the division. Who do you got?
I put the coach. I did this.
Which one?
It's fun. It's interesting. When it's best edition, I mean, I don't know if he's good or bad. I have no idea, but I am intrigued. I'm just always intrigued by this new mold of coach. Taylor Jenkins, where he studied under Mark Dagnott in Oklahoma City. I'm always intrigued by these young, like, guys that are known as, hey, Their experience runs all over the globe. It's different. They're outside the box. I'm always intrigued by that. Sometimes it goes belly up. We've seen that, in Cleveland. What was the guy that they gave
Igor
LeBron
Kokoskov,
James?
and then in Phoenix too, and then we saw the guy in Cleveland. Yeah.
And by the way, I think Kokoskov is a good coach. So sometimes it's just it doesn't work out. But so I'm intrigued to see what happens there, and I'm always interested in this new coaches bringing new things to the game.
I'm very intrigued by it. I didn't want to put it as best addition because it is an unknown. I just put Kristaps Porzingis. I like the addition for Boston. We talked about that already.
The boring right answer.
that's my
right answer.
It's the boring right answer. Most interesting player in the division.
So this one also has a boring correct answer, and it's Ben Simmons. I think he's the most interesting. Like, if you asked me, who are you? I'm going to go with Quentin Grimes, but before I get to him, like if you ask me, hey, game one, Nets are playing different games, I'm probably more intrigued by the Nets because I want to see Ben Simmons if he can like dribble and shoot.
That's true.
But that being said, I did pick Quentin Grimes because I just like him. I think he's such an interesting player. And he's a guy that made a good leap last year. He goes from his rookie season, 6 points, 2 rebounds, to last year, 11.5 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. He's a guy, and in 30 minutes, he's a guy to me that I'm curious to see if that's sort of what he is, this like good role player, or if he has another level in him, because he's got that dog in him. He's tough. He's mentally tough. And he's one of those guys I just kind of like his game, and I'm intrigued to see if he takes a leap.
So I like Quentin Grimes. That's a fine answer. I didn't even really consider Ben Simmons. I'm like, my whole stance on Ben Simmons now is like, call me when it gets interesting. I'm not going to wait to see if he plays. And if it's like,
you're not interested in game one. Like, you're not interested.
No, I'm kind of just over it. I'm just like, if something happens, let me know.
All right. Game number 1, Ben Simmons has 20 points, 5 rebounds.
Now I'm interested.
6 assists. That's not that crazy a stat line. It's a good stat line.
It is for him. That's more points than he scored in the last 2 years combined.
All right.
I got my most interesting player, and this is another boring answer for me. I got to miss Joel Embiid. He's the best player in the division. He's the MVP. Yeah. He's at a career crossroads right here. I mentioned before, like the comparison between him and what's going on with Jokic in Denver, and it couldn't be more different situations. And yet these are the guys that have been arguably the MVP of the league for the last 3 years. So I just find his whole situation so fascinating in Philadelphia, because not just with the James Harden thing, like, does he want to stay in Philly? We got obviously that quote, like, over the summer, like, I just want to win a championship, hopefully in Philly, but I'll do it somewhere else too. You know what I mean? I'm paraphrasing, but I find it fascinating when great players kind of have to make a decision and be a little selfish, and it kind of feels like that might be coming up for him.
The only thing with him, why I would call him not interesting, is, to me, he's in that uncomfortable spot where his regular seasons now no longer matter. So he could come out and average 35 a game. I mean, he was 33 last year, 35, and it'll just be one of those things where it's like, hey, that was really cool, but and it's unfortunate, but it's just it's where he is right now.
Team most likely to blow it up?
I mean, it's Toronto. It's, I think, pretty easy. All signals are that they are. I will say, though, they did trade for Jakob Poeltl, so who knows? Maybe they're actually building, and we don't know.
I think they look. I mean, they got the new coach. There's all this stuff. They're the easy answer. It feels like something's got to give in Toronto. Like, what are you doing? Are you a Siakam team or are you a Scotty Barnes team? Because you can't really be both. And Siakam's got 1 more year left on his contract. You kind of got to figure out what you're doing here. They're the easy answer. They're the boring answer. We could have been fun and been like, I don't know. I think Philadelphia trades James Harden and Joel Embiid, and they blow everything up right now. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think most likely is Toronto.
So if I set the line at 1.5 teams to blow it up this year, because you've also got Brooklyn, who, I mean, they have young pieces. I don't think they're going to do it. You have the Philly. Maybe even the Knicks could, like, Donovan Mitchell. We're trading Jalen Brunson. To me, that would be blowing it up. So if I set the line at 1.5 teams to blow it up, are you taking the over or under?
If just trading James Harden counts, then I'm taking the over. Okay.
It would have to be an Embiid or a bigger deal, like a bigger.
I'll probably I would go the under.
Okay.
I'm just full of boring takes today. It would have been way more fun. Let's go the over. Everybody blows it up.
Hey, small chance Boston has some kind of disappointing. See, I don't.
Buyer's remorse on Jaylen Brown.
Imagine Boston is, a 5 seed at the trade deadline, and it's like, man, this did not happen the way we expected.
Trade Jaylen Brown for Marcus Smart. We need our heart and soul back.
For Marcus Smart.
Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube, Odyssey, wherever you get your podcast. The show's going to be back on Monday with the biggest stories from the NBA weekend. Until next Friday, you can find me over at Locked On Heat and Adam over at Locked On Nuggets. Have a great weekend.